Section 7 of A Philosophy of Glimpses from the discussions of Javier Rivera, Thomas Jockin, and O.G. Rose. This section is called Do Lacks Suggest Humans Have Free Will? Formal causes are what make a thing itself. We can say it's the shape of a thing, and though it's a little more complicated than that, the point is made. The formal cause was arguably the most important to Aristotle of his four causes, and he seems to have thought that the final cause was relative to formal cause. If a thing was made in the form of a cup, then its point and purpose was to hold water. Frankly, formal causes and final causes are so linked that I personally have mistakenly blurred them together in the past, though hopefully nobody noticed. A being with consciousness and will is able to shape its own formal cause to some degree, which means that such a being can also shape its final cause. While a cup cannot change its formal and final cause, I can change the formal and final causes of myself. If I choose to gain the skills necessary for painting, I become a painter and make my purpose painting. If I choose to make myself toward God a lack and become a believer, I make my purpose to know God. Section 1. The power of will and consciousness is that I can transform relative nothings into lacks and vice versa. When I am not a painter and don't want to be a painter, being a painter is nothing to me. But if I decide I want to become an artist, then suddenly being a painter is lacking until I develop the skills, earn the title, and so forth. Arguably, being a painter was always lacking, but due to my will not being oriented toward it, being a painter was more like nothing relative to me, a relative nothing. What I experience like nothing versus a lack seems relative to my consciousness, will, and overall orientation. If I form myself in X way, then the Y, which represents the final cause of X, will now be a lack to me. But if I never so form myself, Y would always be like nothing. And this might sound like an abstract point, but it constitutes an emotional reality. If I suddenly want to become a writer, the fact that I lack writing skills will be very vivid. I'll feel it. To get to the point, the very fact I can change what is like nothing into a lack suggests I have free will. Also, the very fact that I feel what I am lacking, which is arguably the feeling that I am not free to just have X, is also phenomenological evidence of freedom. This is a negative argument like those outlined in Words and Determinism by O.G. Rose, and please note that this argument is not primarily an abstract argument based on general premises. The argument that we have freedom here is primarily based on the emotional experience of lacking something that we don't want to lack. Having freedom or not is not something we simply believe. It is something we feel and experience. The evidence for freedom is phenomenological. Humans are different from rocks in that we can change our formal final causes, an experience-based reality that justifies a metaphysical effort to determine the difference between us and rocks. No, we cannot readily change the shape of our bodies and give ourselves wings, at least not yet. So I don't mean to suggest we can entirely change our forms and final causes. Though humans may have free will, we don't have total will, a point elaborated on free will by O.G. Rose with the free in parentheses. But we don't need total will in order to avoid being a product of deterministic forces. It is not a black and white choice between being totally free or not free at all. Rather, we have enough freedom to influence the direction of our lives, a view I call directionalism, and that means we shape our formal final causes. In this way, the reality of lacks versus nothing is evidence of free will, and furthermore, the reality of free will makes the topics of lacks important. If free will exists, as the existence of lacks and our capacity to change nothings into lacks suggests, then there is reason to think that we are not only products of physical processes, that we are shaped also by beyond physical processes that could have a physical origin, do note. Hence, in lacks providing reason to believe in free will, we have further reason to think that metaphysics is a valid undertaking. If humans have free will, then we have influence over our capacity to reason, how we experience time, whether we live in the moment or look to the future, how we define ourselves as children of God, belonging to a good family, and so on and so on. To use language from A is A by O.G. Rose, we are not entirely bound by A is A. We can orient ourselves toward A without B. We choose our lacks, and in this we choose our present lives. Section 2. Our final cause is lacking from us, and yet it isn't nothing because of our formal cause, which is present in us. And in us shaping what is present, we can shape what isn't present as well. What was ultimately nothing couldn't be so shaped, and the fact we can shape what is beyond the physical suggests we are not totally bound by the physical. On these grounds, again, metaphysics is a valid line of inquiry, for we seem metaphysical with the meta in parentheses, entities existing in a middle space between A is A and without B. Since lacks exist, humans are not products of pure determinism. We have wills. We are not totally free, but we are certainly free to some degree. If we have wills, we are primarily definable as distinct from physical reality, which only has causes. If this is the case, then humans are special in kind, as metaphysical with the meta in parentheses. No, This doesn't mean our origins can't be physical, but it does mean that we have somehow emerged to be distinct from the physical world around us. While the world is a network of causes, we are a network of causes and wills. If humans are distinct from physical reality, which we have reason to think based on lacks and our wills toward those lacks, what other special entities do humans give being thanks to the metaphysical being of humans, with the meta in parentheses? If we could list some of those out, we might be able to bring this introductory treatise to a close while providing direction for future projects.